name is Lustig. I come from a small town in Romania by the name of Structura. It was near a bigger town, which a lot of you probably heard because of Eli Wiesel, Sighet. We are right next to Sighet. My father was the Rav in town. He also had his own yeshiva. I come from a family of 7 siblings. I was the oldest, and the youngest was 2 months old. Till 1940, life in our town was quite good. We were in a small town. We had no bus service. There was no, in the house we had no water. It was a very primitive life, but it was a very nice life. Quiet, families lived together, and it was very nice. In 1940, Hungary came and reoccupied us. After that, it became not Romania anymore, it was Hungary. Immediately, everything changed. We couldn't go to school anymore. No Jew could have a store anymore. They couldn't go to work anymore. Everything was different. The Jews were totally cut off from all their livelihood. We lived like this till 1944. It was very hard, but we managed because we had no other choice. In 1944, we were reoccupied again, but this time by the Nazis. When they came, it became even worse, because they not just didn't let us go to school, they persecuted us. It came right before Pesach of 1944. They came and they arrested my father, who was the rabbi in town, and the shoichet. We didn't know where they took him. We didn't know what's happening. We had no radio. We had no newspaper. We really didn't know what is happening in the world. It was a very primitive kind of life. We had to make Pesach. We had no choice. Even so, my father wasn't there. My mother's mother lived with us. So we were 7 siblings, my mother and my grandmother. We made Pesach. It was very uncomfortable, but that's what had to be done. The last day of Pesach, Acharon Shel Pesach, all of a sudden, the Nazis went in the middle of town and they took bullhorns and they announced that every Jew, man, woman, and child, has to come in front of the shul, in front of the synagogue. And everybody can take along a small little package with them. We didn't understand why do they want us to go there? Why do they want us to take a little package? Food we couldn't take along, we didn't have. It was the last day of Pesach. And it wasn't like here, you had a freezer, you had a refrigerator, we had none of that. So it was day to day. So it was the last day of Pesach, we had no food. We went in front by the shul. When we got there, we realized they're going to take us away from town. Why? The whole street was lined with horse and buggies. That was the mode of transportation. There was no bus, there was no cars, no nothing. They loaded us up on those horse and buggies, and they started to go out of town. When we reached in front of the church, every goy, every Gentile who had any kind of musical instrument stayed lined up in front of the church and was playing music. They were so happy to see us go that they played music while they were taking us out of town. Where did they take us? They took us 3 towns further, to the town of Dragomires. There we were in a ghetto already. They took part of that town and they roped it off. And that became the ghetto. But of course, there was not room for everybody. So each house, each room in a house housed one family. Like we were, my grandmother, my mother, myself, and my 6 siblings, we had one room. The next room was another family. We had no food and we had very little money. But what does a Jew do? When you can, you help. There were people who did have money, so they opened up kitchens so we could go get some food. They also organized right away so that children, the boys, could learn. They opened up like a cheder, a day school, for the children to go and learn. We were there in the ghetto a few days after. My father was still not with us. But a few days after Pesach, my father came back. They brought back my father. When he came back, he still had his beard, his payas. He was a very Hasidic Jew. And 2 days later, the Nazis came and they asked him to come out to the porch. He didn't know why, but you had to go. You couldn't say no. They sat him down on a chair and they cut off his beard and his payas. That was probably the worst thing they could have done to him, because after that he would not leave the house without taking a kerchief and tying on his face. He felt naked without his beard and payas. We were in the ghetto till 6 days before Shavuos. 6 days before Shavuos, again the Germans came with the bullhorns. And they announced we had to gather at a certain spot in the ghetto. We figured again they're going to take us away. As we got there, we saw again the horses and buggies. But this time it wasn't one town, there were a lot of towns, because we were a lot of little towns. So there was not enough room for everybody to get up onto the horse and buggy. The elderly people, the babies. We had to walk. They walked us another few towns where there was a railroad station. When we got there, we realized what is happening. There they had the cattle cars ready for us. Now, the cattle cars it was a railroad, a long train with a lot of cars. Each car was empty. There was nothing in the car. There was no water, there was no bathroom facilities, nothing. And they started loading us into these cars. Now, they put in too many people into a car. If you ended up sitting, you couldn't stand up. You couldn't, there was no room. If you were standing, you couldn't sit down. We had no food, there was no water. Each car had just a tiny little window, that's all. And they locked us into those cars, and as soon as the cars were ready, they started going. They were taking us to Poland, but on the way they took us through Czechoslovakia. By every station, the train stopped. They didn't let us out, they didn't open the cars. But a lot of the towns, the Jews were not taken away yet. And they realized who was in those cars. So they came, and through those little windows, they gave us food and they gave us water. Even so, it was Mesiras Nefesh. It was really dangerous. If the Germans caught them, they killed them. By them to kill somebody was nothing. A human being doesn't count. We arrived 3 days before Shavuos into Auschwitz. Auschwitz was a concentration camp in Poland. Now, Auschwitz had several sections. It had Auschwitz and then it had Birkenau. I'll explain you what it was. When we got there, they opened up the cattle cars and they told us to jump out. There were a lot of, when we got out of the cars, there was, the whole place was full of smoke and the stench was terrible. There were a lot of Jewish men there, they were from Poland because they came before us. And we asked them, what's that stench? What's that smoke? Those who were a little nicer, gentler, said, you'll find out, don't worry. The other one said, they're burning your parents there already. As we got out of the cars, they lined us up 5 in a row. Men on one side, women on the other side. One of the men told my mother, give your baby to your mother so you will remain alive. Because if they'll see you with the baby, you are not going to live. But of course you wouldn't part with the baby. We were 5 in a row, and then Mengele came, Dr. Mengele de Russia. What did he do? He made a selection. I was in many of his selections, but that was the first one. You go to the right, you go to the left. We didn't know what it means, right or left. We didn't even fight. We went exactly where they told us. As we finished with the selection, they said they're taking us for showers. There were 2 big buildings in Auschwitz. One was the gas chamber and one was the crematorium. The gas chamber has 2 sections. They had 2 big rooms. They both had shower caps. Those who went to the right, they made us all undress. They took away our clothes. They cut our hair. They took away if we had a watch. Whatever we had, everything was taken away. Those who went to the right, we went into the showers. It's true, it came water and we had a shower. Those who were on the left were in the other side of the room. They also had shower heads, but from those shower heads, gas came. We heard them yelling. They were scratching on the walls because they were being gassed. They were being killed there. But they couldn't get out. They were locked in there. From the gas chambers, when they were all dead already in there, then there was a group of men who were called the Sonderkommando. They were Jewish men. That was their job. They had to take all the corpses and shove them into the crematorium. The crematorium was like you see now the pizza ovens. They went straight in like that. After they went there, then the same Sonderkommando, they took out the ashes and they buried them in the back. It was like it's one big cemetery because I don't know where I can never go to a cemetery, I don't know where they are. They don't have a matzeva, they have nothing. Those who were on the other side, like where I went, so they gave us clothing. And what was the clothing they gave us? They gave us one-piece dress, like a nightgown, and a pair of clogs, like the Dutch wear, those wooden clogs. That was the whole dress. No socks, no nothing. And again, they started marching us now to Birkenau. Like I told you, Auschwitz had another section, Birkenau. There were lagers, the A lager, the B lager, and the C lager. C is like here is C. In those lagers, we went to work, but not from the A lager. As we got to the A lager, the first thing there was a barrack. And in the barrack, what was in the barrack? Nothing but bunks, three-layer bunks, and in each bunk were 6 people. Now, there were no pillows, there were no blankets, there was a mattress from straw. We had no other clothing, just what I told you. When next day, after we got into that lager, they lined us all up, and two Germans were standing by a table like this, with this, and they told us, pull up your sleeve. And they tattooed a number on our hands. Now, how did they tattoo the number? I don't know how they do here tattoos. What did they do? They had an inkwell, they had fire, and a pen. They stuck the pen into the ink, into the fire, and if you, I don't know if you can see, but each number has dots. It's all dots. It was a very, very painful procedure to put on this number on the hand. Mine is 87443. They were in the lager A. There was no water, there was no bathroom. Every morning, we had to get up and go for Zählerpell. Zählerpell is like the the count. They used to count us to make sure that nobody escaped. You couldn't escape. Auschwitz was surrounded with barbed wire. We saw many times people who ran to the wire, they thought they'd escape, they were electrocuted on the spot. The next morning, the German came and they said, we have to go Zählerpell. After they counted us, they gave us breakfast. And what do you think the breakfast was? A half a cup of black coffee. Then they took us to the bathroom. We could not go, only in the morning when they took us, and in the evening when they took us to the bathroom. It was not a very comfortable situation, but you suffer whatever you were dealt. I was in the A lager for 3 weeks, then I was transferred to the C lager. From the C lager, we went to work. I ended up in a Weberei. A Weberei is a weaving mill. They used to give us different kind of material, and we used to have to cut it in strips. And I don't know if you ever saw a weaving machine where they make carpet. You put it through and then you pull the thing. That's what we did. But we had a quota. We had to make a certain amount of yardage every day. Now, by nature, some people are faster, some people are slower. And the Germans were standing right there on the side by the room to watch us. We used to see that some girls did not finish, those who were slow. We used to watch when the Germans turned their side. We used to say, let's change places. You come here, I'll go there, I'll finish for you. But this is what a Jew does. In the worst of circumstances, even so you know your life is in danger, if they're going to catch you, you still try to help your other Jew. We came back in the evening from the Weberei. We first had to go back to Zählerpell. They counted us again. Then they gave us supper. And what was supper? Was a half a cup of beet soup. Not the red beets, the sugar beets, but you never saw sugar beet in there. It was water and a tiny piece of bread, like a slice of bread. That was that was the whole food for the day. A half a cup of coffee in the morning, a half a cup of sugar beets, and a slice of bread. That was the whole food that we got. Then every 4 weeks, Mengele came and made a selection. But this time we knew already. If he puts you to the left, you're going to the crematorium. You're finished. So we tried not to go there, but if he picked you, you still had no choice. I was small, I was young, and he picked me. But whenever he made a selection, we were in our birthday suits. So I took the dress that I had and I covered my number. They'll ask me, why you cover your number? I figured, I'll try to run to the other side. In case, if it's possible. At that time, I was brave. I was young. I guess I wanted to live. But if they see my number, you can't escape. But if they won't catch my number, maybe I'll be able to save myself. I was lucky. Came a moment when they looked aside, I ran back. I was lucky. I had 4 first cousins. We always stayed 5 in a row. So I got back into the line, but now there was a problem. Now we were 6 in the line. You couldn't be 6. The Germans, they are very punctual. Everything is just so. We had to ask everybody in the back, please move back 1. Again, they didn't have to do it. It was a dangerous thing to even ask it. But they did it because this is what the Jew does. We always try to help, if at all just possible. Every 4 weeks, they also took us for a shower. Otherwise, there was no place to wash. And the food is only what I told you they gave us. We were in Auschwitz. I'm going to make it short. We were in Auschwitz till towards the end of December. Towards the end of December, let me not forget one thing. We knew when was Rosh Hashanah, we knew when was Yom Kippur. Why? Because on the other side of the men's lager, there was, another side of the ladies' lager, there was a men's lager. And they used to scream across, it's Shabbos now, it's going to be Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be Yom Kippur, so we knew. So we fasted Yom Kippur. We took the morning coffee we didn't take. When we came back, we took the soup and the bread. But we saw it was still light. So we took it with us into the barrack. We didn't eat it, we waited till it was dark in order to be able to fast for Yom Kippur. We tried, still tried to do what was possible. It came towards the end of December. The Germans saw that the Russians are very close by and they are going to liberate us. Well, they are not going to allow that to happen to us. That would be too good for us. They made, if you heard of the Death March, I was in the Death March. What was the Death March? The Death March was, we marched from Auschwitz, which is Poland, to Bergen-Belsen, which is Germany. It was a few days. That time, Poland has a lot of snow, very cold. We had no scarves, no hats, no socks, nothing, just a dress, and that's how we marched. And that's why 3/4 of the people in the Death March didn't make it. Why did I make it? I don't know. I guess God wanted I should stay alive. We marched for about 4 days till we got to Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen did not have a gas chamber. But it was a lot of other problems. Again, there, not even every 4 weeks they took us for a shower. So the first thing that the problem came, we had typhoid fever and we had to go to work. It didn't help. We hallucinated, we had temperature, we had typhoid fever, but you had to go to work. There was no choice of not going. That was the first big problem in our ship. Besides food, we didn't have food, even less. There we only got maybe once a week bread. We got the half a cup of soup and coffee in the morning and a half a cup of soup in the evening. That's it. Once a week maybe we got bread. But they did even something terrible, even with the bread. They took glass. They were such rishum. They were such mean people. They took glass, they ground it up, and they put it in the bread. So consequently, a lot of people died from eating the bread when they gave up with the glass. The first big problem was, like I said, typhoid fever. The second problem was body lice. We had no hair, so we didn't have no hair lice. We had body lice. the itching was beyond belief. And of course, we had no soap, we had no water, you couldn't clean yourself. You had to take off each one individually from your body. But how do you do your back? We had to pair up. I'll do your back, you do my back. But through all this suffering, we had to go to work. And what was the work in Bergen-Belsen? We dug ditches. I don't know what they needed the ditches for. I have no answer for that. But we dug ditches. We had to lift those heavy stones and everything. We were very young. I was 14 years old. After that, we had a third problem. They did not remove the people who had typhoid fever or those who died, remained on the barrack floor. Now we had a problem. How do you get out of the barrack to go to work? Do you step on the dead body or you don't go to work? If you're not going to go to work, they're going to kill you. You're going to go to work, how are you going to step over everybody? We used to say, I'm sorry, we asked them they should excuse us, but it was a very traumatic thing to do. Also, the stench in the barrack was terrible because there were dead bodies there. They were, again, very cramped in the barracks because here they were 7 in a bunk. In Auschwitz we were 6, but here they didn't have room. They put 7 of us. And again, we still had no clothes, we had no food. It was miserable to be there. But I guess we still wanted to live. We still wanted somehow to live. And then one nice day, somebody woke up and he said, you know, the English are here. They called them the Tommies. They came and they liberated us. But then what they did was also they made a big mistake. Being that we hadn't eaten, this was already May of 45, so we were already more than a year without food practically. What was the first meal they gave us? Baked beans. Now you can imagine when your stomach is so not used to eating, they give you such heavy food, half the people never died. But you know, they didn't care. But the English right away realized what they were doing. So the next day they gave us chocolate, they gave us farina, they gave us rice, but we still had no clothes. But there were a lot of German houses around the camp. So we went, they ran away. As soon as the English came, those Germans ran away. They were afraid. We went to those houses, I don't know, maybe it was stealing, I don't know what it was, but we took some clothes because we had nothing what to wear. And from there, I stayed in Bergen-Belsen a very short time. I met my brother there because he was in the men's lager. My father and my brother were in Duro camp, but my father passed away in the camp. But my brother remained alive, so I met him. And we were transferred to Sweden. I was in Sweden 2.5 years. And when I had uncles, my mother had 3 brothers in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn, and they sent me papers, and I came to the United States. I got married, I have children, I have grandchildren, I have a lot of great-grandchildren. And I have to thank God that He helped me with this. I'm sorry I had to tell you this sad story, but this is what happened. I don't give speeches, I just say what I went through.
Any questions?
Yeah.
You said,
I'm sorry. go
Sorry.
ahead.
At beginning, what age you was at that time?
I was 14.
14. And when the English they came, what age?
Well, it was a year later.
1 year?
1 year later.
You was lucky.
You said that at one point that the non-Jews were playing music. Why were they so happy to see all the Jews go?
Because they were all anti-Semites, like you find them now. They were Catholics, they were Gentiles, and they were, even so, their whole livelihood was from the Jews in town, but they were happy to get rid of us.
What they do Palestinian now?
Exactly. I went back, I took back my 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a son. I took them back 50 years later to my town. I wanted to show my children from where I come. It's still the same way. They still have no indoor plumbing, they have no buses, they have no cars, they have nothing. But they're still anti-Semites. They still Jid, Jid, Jid. That's it.
Did you ever go back to see your home?
Yeah, I went 50 years later, exactly.
And your home is there still?
One of my houses was there, one of them wasn't there. But everything was there, the whole, they did not progress anything at all.
Yeah, the reputation was that the female guards were worse than the male guards. Did you find that to be the case?
Well, we had what they called them, they didn't call them female guards. Every barrack had a Stubälteste, and she was like in charge to make sure that we keep the place clean. But what was there to keep clean? We had nothing. There were no bathrooms in there was no water, we had no clothes, there was nothing to keep clean and not to keep clean. So I did not experience any this. But these were Jewish girls, these were not Nazis. These were all Jewish girls. They were called Stubältestes.
You said that?
Could you stand up so I can hear you better? I'm an old lady.
You said that when you were in the cattle carts that some of the other Jews in the towns passing by would give you food. Did they stop the cars for them to give you?
No.
Or they would-
Whenever the train passed by a railroad stop, the train stopped. And they realized who was in this cattle cars. So they came and they gave us water and food through those little windows.
Yes, other Holocaust survivors that I have met, they say, similar, they just say, where was God? And did you ever think, where is God during this process?
Whether I thought where God was, never. That was never, and I never questioned him.
Did anybody else in your family survive? Did you find
Yes, I
any other-
have one brother, he lives in Israel.
It was you and your brother and that was it?
That's it. I lost 5 siblings, and I lost my grandparents, my parents, all in one shot.